Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hello, everybody.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples for how small, emerging, and challenger CPG, consumer packaged goods, brands can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, or how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business through to the end consumer, or how to go about finding an investor if you're ready for that aspect. Bottom line is we would love to help you be successful by highlighting the many important aspects of this journey to establishing and growing your brand. Tracy and I have been doing this a long time. We've made a lot of mistakes, and we've done a few good things, so we're here to help you. Please follow our podcast on iTunes or Spotify, leave us a review, and consider sharing the show with a friend or colleague that may benefit from the content. Tracy?
Bruce and I have been involved in consumer packaged goods commercial operations roles for over 30 years. We define commercial operation functions relating to sales, marketing, trade marketing, broker and distributor management, agency selection and management, new product development, brand acquisition and divestitures, and customer management. We also invite on our episodes friends and former colleagues from all aspects of the Road to Retail process to come on the show and offer their opinions and experience. Again, we encourage you to subscribe to our iTunes or Spotify channel at Road, 2 Retail.
Hey, everybody. Let me tell you about our sponsor, Media Manager Marketplace. You've heard us say many times on this program that getting on the shelf isn't victory. It's getting the product off the shelves, out the door, and into the consumer's shopping cart that's going to make your product take root and grow. Best way to accomplish that is with advertising and marketing, and that's why we're so happy to have Media Manager Marketplace as one of the cornerstone sponsors of the Road to Retail. Media Manager Marketplace specializes in helping brands maximize the reach and impact of their advertising dollars by making sure that your precious marketing budget is spent on the right media mix to match your brand's demographics. And if you think it's going to cost you millions of dollars to create a national TV or radio marketing campaign, then you need to think again. Media Manager Marketplace can get your campaign started for far less than you might imagine. Their expertise in using the right blend of advertising to help drive demand for your product could be the difference between a 90-day trial and a nationwide rollout of your brand. Buck Robinson, president of Media Manager Marketplace and an industry veteran of 30 years, will personally review your product and offer his free assessment. Email him directly at buck@themediamgr.com. That's Buck, like a dollar bill, and he will stretch that baby for you at themediamgr.com.
Again, we encourage you to subscribe to our iTunes or Spotify channel at Road, 2 Retail.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining the show today. Tracy, who's our guest?
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us today, guys. And today we have a very distinguished guest who's going to give us some great insight on brands and small emerging brands and all kinds of good stuff today. So Corey Scholibo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So Corey, let's kick off our episode and tell our audience a little bit about you. You've got a fantastic background. It's started some really cool brands, and so just tell us a little bit about your background to our audience today.
Well, thank you much. Well, my name is Corey Scholibo, and I'm a serial social entrepreneur, I like to say. What that means for me is I feel like I'm always looking for the thing behind the thing. When I discover what I think is the future, then I go there, and I always find something else behind it. For my first company, I worked in entertainment branding for years. I worked as an editor at a magazine, a major news magazine, for a few years. And then I kind of discovered the green movement around 08, 09, and I really felt like the environmental movement from the CPG standpoint was the future, and sustainability, as we've all seen come to pass from now, is really become table stakes. But at the time, it was quite novel and revolutionary to think about doing green products. And we had this idea that you could go to your local coffee shop, right, and you could probably get a compostable cup, let's say, for your coffee. But when you went to retail, you had no choice as a consumer. There were just the same few brands: Dixie, Chinette, Solo, Styrofoam, plastic. And it was the only aisle in the grocery store or the retail store that was undisrupted. You would go down the aisle and there was green cleaning. You would go down the aisle and there was everything from natural ketchup to, organic eggs, etc. But nothing for tableware. So we started a company called Repurpose. We're now the leading brand in the space. We're in Costco, Whole Foods, etc. And became the kind of the green leader in creating that category, which was really great. And then as I was going through the green movement, I worked on that for about 10 years, and I stepped away during COVID, and went to be with my partner in Chicago, and then kind of got on a track to start another company called Wile, Wile, and that is a line of women's supplements for women in midlife, specifically addressing perimenopause and menopause. It was a weird way that it came about, but my business partners who didn't know each other, including a friend of mine who we also have a podcast, or used to do a podcast on green retail branding, called the Eco Echo. And she's like, menopause is the future. This is what I want to work on. All my partners were saying that. And I said, okay, well, this is interesting. All these women that are really smart think this is the future. So I really, what's my role here as a male in the space? And it became clear to me that about 50% of the population for about 50% of their life are going through this. And so from a mission-based entrepreneur, that seemed like the most impact I could have would be to work on that demographic. And at that time, I sort of thought about, we need these women to feel good and be in the workforce and be in the activism space if we're going to save democracy, if we're going to save the climate problem. Like, we can't have our most prominent women just sort of sitting out life around 45 because they're going through this stage. So that felt like kind of a thing behind the thing. And now I'm obsessed with the attention economy and the dangers of social media and what that's doing to our brains, to our democracy, to our society. And so I've created my most recent product. I sold Wile last year, or actually this year, and have started a company called Dayo. And this is an app that helps people limit their social media use by rewarding them with actual points and dollars in a marketplace, so that they're being motivated by achieving goods and services, as opposed to just sort of yelling at them to use this addictive technology and suddenly somehow figure out how to have the willpower to stop. And so we have a new thesis that we're going to use the carrot model to lower social media use and create more moderation as opposed to the stick. And to me, that's where I want to focus my mission-based entrepreneurialism right now. I feel like that is what we must solve, we must address if any of this is going to happen. And of course, it's all ladders in, I think, to retail really nicely. It's an e-commerce platform, but I do think brands and CPG has a space in mission and in activism. And I think we're a part of changing conversations and a part of changing consumer behavior. We're not the only thing. There's nonprofits, there's governments, et cetera, but we have a role. And I've always felt like CPG was where I felt the most effective.
That's awesome.
Great. So Corey, as we talk about Wile and Repurpose, maybe, when you think about tying into a mission or a cause, how do you connect those dots? Is it sort of serendipity, or do you, when you see something, like you said, the thing behind the thing, do you head for that? And the follow-up would be, if you tie in with kind of a formal charity or mission, I'm making this up, like a Khan Academy, is getting those organizations excited about this relatively easy, or do they take a lot of convincing to come on board, because everyone's sort of, checking each other out to make sure you're not, a loon or something?
I feel like when you're doing mission-based consumer products plays, you get a lot of goodwill, you get a lot of free publicity, you get a lot of free return calls at the very least, right? Like, it's not another, soda asking to have presence at your event, for instance. I'm saying, I'm going to actually green your event, or in the case of Wile, we're actually going to do something valuable for women in your space. So you actually get a lot of, I think, goodwill that I've never done, like, a nakedly consumerist play, right? I've never looked at the market and said, hey, coconut water is breaking. There's 12 coconut waters. I'm going to be the 13th, and here's how I'm going to get 1% of the market share, which will equal 100 million. It bores me. It's another coconut water. Who cares? We don't need any more trash in the world. We don't need any more coconut waters. So that whole approach, that sort of like, brown khakis and blue shirt, you know, no offense, but like, a bunch of like marketing people moved into the space, right? And started to create these like driven by market analysis brands, as opposed to coming from sort of a root place, a gut place. Now with Repurpose, it was serendipity. My business partner had been playing with the concept. We wanted to do a B2B play. I wanted to do a D2C play, or a business to consumer play. And we kind of just played with it. It was early on. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. I didn't know how to raise money. I didn't know how to sell a product. I didn't know how to do anything. And we started with all of that. We were bagging. We had a miss ship from the factory, and we were, at the warehouse up all night rebagging the bags to go into Gelson's, like our first customer, right? So, did that whole ignorance ride. Certainly would have done things differently if I'd known more. But if I'd known more, I wouldn't have done that business, because it was really hard. It took a really long time, and it took a lot of money. So I think disruption models are difficult. And so if you're looking at something as purely by the numbers, I think that's kind of hard. With Wile, it was interesting because we were getting data from Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble. Johnson & Johnson actually approached us to incubate the idea originally. And, I actually had all of their data. Like, I knew what this woman was up to. I knew, I guess I had the best data you can get for this woman. And they didn't know shit about her, to be totally honest. Like, they didn't know her. They didn't know how to address her. They would call her their future core customer, but they wouldn't know what to build for her. And so what was happening in that space was, women were going through their period years, and then they were going through their pregnancy years, and they have that all on lockdown. Like, they know what to sell her. They've got the products and brands. And then she kind of drops off. They don't know what to do with her until she enters her diaper years, right? In her 80s. Now they got diapers and calcium chews and all that sort of geriatric, for lack of a better word, consumerism, but nothing in between. And this woman is now living, 30% longer, and she's all these great years, like between 40 and post childbearing and whatever. So there was a lot of data telling us what to do, right? In that scenario, it wasn't just like a gut idea. And we knew that women were terrified of HRT, which is called hormone replacement therapy, which is demonized for no good reason. There's a nurse's study. I could talk about it forever, but it's basically 3 generations of women have been cheated out of this technology due to this fear of cancer. I could debunk it all day. And it's kind of coming around, but we knew she was already scared of that. We knew she wanted a natural supplement to help her, manage this transition. So we knew all that from a data standpoint, and then we built against it. And I knew we could build the cleanest. That we went and found a naturopath who was the preeminent naturopath in the space, and we built what was the widest assortment of supplements that would address the widest number of consumers. Because if you go to a naturopath, you might get a very different, prescription than me. But what would most benefit the widest number of people? And turn those into, we built a product for hot flashes. We built a product for regular periods, because that's the first sign of menopause. We built a perimenopause formula, but then we also went into emotional states. We had a tincture for anger, for burnout, for worry, because it's a nebulous phase. It's not a disease state, right? Like, it's a transitional phase. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just experiencing it in varying degrees, and there are varying levels of support you can engage in. So that one was a bit more driven by data, but still coming ironically from this very like gut feeling of my partners. Similar to this one, we don't know for sure that people will engage in this app in this way. We have this thesis, but we already had the passion, we already had the idea of helping people get offline, and we were already kind of off to the races. So we kind of, that one I think was a bit of a combo of data and gut, but I think they generally come from someplace internal, right? Someplace. I don't know how you can be an entrepreneur and not really feel passionately about what you're doing. It's too hard. You don't make enough money unless you hit it big. And I would have to really believe what I was doing all day, every day. I just don't think I could sell another mushroom supplement just because it was trending.
Well, Tracy and I, we talk about all the time, Corey, the need to be different and differentiation, because your example of the 13th coconut water, we usually do the 13th gluten-free chocolate chip cookie. There's really just no need. So one other little follow-up point here I'd love you to talk about for a second. When you approach retailers with these mission-driven brands, again, Repurpose and Wile specifically, do they kind of do you ever experience any pushback? Because these days it seems like, depending upon the mission, they're like, oh, I don't know how these people will react or how those people will react. I mean, the Wile seems like, gosh, how do you have a problem with either of your two examples? But just interested in how those discussions, especially with your initial retailers, went. Were they like immediately on board, green, I get it, or natural solutions, I get it? Or were they like, what?
I had two radically different experiences. So Repurpose, when I first went in to pitch people, we would, I mean, I joke, we say we get laughed out of the room, but like I once went to a meeting at Safeway. This is probably like 2010, 2012, I don't know, 2011. And they were like, I don't think green's a thing. I think it's kind of a fad. I think it's
Oh,
going to
oh,
pass. I don't
oh,
think it's going to be, I don't really think we have to worry about that. Like that was where we were at. And then we're in the tableware category, right? We're in this incredibly high performing category, like multi-billion dollar category with no growth, like period. And but who wants to mess with it? Who wants to play with it? Who wants to mess with this? Like you just set it and forget it. It churns. People who get that desk are not there because they're the most innovative, founder of like I found the coolest brands. Like that's not what they're there to do. This is about sense, in aggregate kind of business. So I think that was one kind of hard, but B, no, I don't think anyone really believed that green was important. And then we would get like kind of one SKU in. Safeway was one of our first customers, actually. There's a really great category leader there. Actually, it was his category assistant, the one who really does the analysis. And if you listen to this podcast, you probably know the assistants do the work, right? They do the analysis. They're the make best friends with the assistant category manager.
great.
But anyway, one of them he just was younger, and his name was Parker Lewis. I think he works now at Method, but he did all the analysis and he believed in us and he made the case, and we got one SKU in to like I don't know 100 Safeways or something, and then slowly built from there, and then eventually a couple years later we could get 3 SKUs in, and then we had a tipping point. Well, the industry had a tipping point. I don't know if you remember when there was this viral photo of a straw in a turtle's nose that like everyone freaked out about, that turtles were getting straws stuck in their nose. I mean, it was globally like viral. And right after that, we started seeing the straw bans and all these other things. And so that kind of kicked us off into realizing a little bit more tangible the plastic pollution problem that we already knew. And from there, I was getting like, hey, can we have 5 SKUs tomorrow? Can we have 10 SKUs next month? Like it just tipped. And then we had 13 SKUs. And then the category is now private label, and they call us to do private labels. So I watched the category go from this isn't a category, go away, to can we have everything you have to give us your private label as well. With Wile, very different. I sold Whole Foods, Walgreens, Grove on a deck. Like we hadn't even finished all of the final formulations.
Wow.
All of these customers, all of these retailers know they need this customer. They need a woman over 40. Who do you think is going to a grocery store right now? They're over 40, right? Like it's traditional shoppers are this age group. They know they don't have anything for her, just like the Johnson & Johnsons were saying, just like the Procter & Gamble's were saying. They know they need to address her. They don't know how. So they're desperate for solutions to bring this customer in. And so it was the easiest selling process. I had to really be more strategic about where we didn't go and when we didn't go than any other way. And I would say in that scenario, we would say, look, if you're going to put us on the shelf and forget us, then forget it. Like, let's not even do it. Like, unless you're going to name this category, unless you're going to tell this customer that she exists and she should be looking for this, we're going to fail. She doesn't even know you have this kind of product, let alone our solution to this problem, right? She doesn't even know the problem exists. And retailers have not really figured out how to address her. And they're trying, but I didn't have a problem convincing them to try.
Yeah, that's great. And for our small emerging brand audience, what Corey said was gold. It's about where you don't want to go, because a lot of founders we talk to, Corey, say, I just want doors. I just want doors. I want doors. I don't care where I go. I want to be everywhere. And that's just not the best strategy. So that's a great example.
To build your audience up, and that takes time, and most people don't have the patience for it.
Isn't that the truth? Tracy?
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about the best advice you'd give a small emerging brand just starting out. And 2 subpoints to that. One is, do you really recommend starting D2C before you go to retail? And then the second thing that we see founders struggle with is they've got a plan, they've got a strategy, and it's so hard for them to stay with that strategy. So
Mhm.
maybe tell our audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, um, where to go and what to do. I think founders skip a lot of founders, especially, and we had some of this with Wile because we were seasoned, right? So I wasn't really going to go to a farmer's market and pop up a table and talk to women all day, nor was I that customer. But
Right.
I think we missed out a little bit on that opportunity. And I think brands really miss out on the opportunity if they don't pop up a table somewhere and just talk to somebody. Like, what am I trying to do? Do you even buy it? Do you get it? Am I using the right words? I may be saying, healthy and you want to hear longevity. I don't know, right? Like, until I get up there and start talking to people. And I think people skip that phase a lot. So I would say if you're a small brand, plan to have a few months to just be in front of people all day long and take all the feedback, even if it's negative, before you really finalize your messaging, your mission, because it's like kill your darlings in writing, right? Just because you think it's what we should say doesn't mean the consumer is going to respond to it at all. Um, that I think is key. I like to encourage well, supplement brands are different than other brands, right? But in supplements, you really need to build something smaller first, right? So you're going to want to start maybe at like an Erewhon, although that's what everyone says, and it's very hard to get into and very expensive, so it's not even real anymore. But maybe like a Lassen's or a smaller retailer who you can actually go. And then I say, if you're in LA, like launch in Lassen's and then go to Lassen's like every weekend and talk to people right in front of your set. Go talk to the customers. Don't skip that part. Don't rely on D2C. D2C is interesting. It's absolutely still a great business model if you can make it work. But I don't know a lot of people making it work anymore in the small brand space. The CAC is too high. The attribution points are too long. It used to be like 3 attribution points and $20 CACs. Now it's $100 CACs and 12 attribution points. It just doesn't guarantee anything. And so most of the brands that I know, especially supplement brands, have abandoned it altogether. Also, investors over the last, I would say over 23 for sure, for the first time kind of walked away from it. It was the first time I was investor pitches, and they were like, "Why are you even doing this whole D2C thing anymore?" And I'm like, "Because that was apparently the most important metric as of 12 to 18 months ago." But the appeal of retail, at least from the investor standpoint, is very high right now, like actual physical brick and mortar retail. And I think e-commerce is really taking a beating. But if you can figure it out, and I think figuring it out is usually inexpensive products, things targeted at Gen Z, sophisticated $40 supplements that require education, it's just not a D2C play. You know what I mean? It's just too complicated. It has to be like, oh, you want a new insulated pot holder? Great. I can understand that. And it's only $5, right? So I think that that's what's changed. And I don't know that I would recommend a brand spend a lot of money on D2C in the beginning anymore. I would almost say to start from a small retail presence if you can. Now, if you can't get anyone to play with you, then you're obviously going to have to go that route. But think about it differently. Think about niche marketplaces. Think about your e-commerce partners. We had D2C, but we launched at Grove. Grove is a customer, secretly has a 40 to 50-year-old customer on lockdown. Thrive is all sexy, right? But like Thrive is young people. They turned us down because they said I can't sell a $40 supplement to my consumer. Grove can sell a $40 supplement to their consumer all day long. So not a sexy place maybe to launch, but like, I mean, I think Grove is sexy, but not everyone else does. Go to Grove, launch there, spend your time building an audience there, go to whatever online retailer you can find. There's so many alternate ways to launch things, TikTok shop, etc. Be creative. But just spinning up a website and throwing up Google ads, I mean, it's going to be tough. Maybe if you have the right product, it'll break, but I would say 8 out of 10 of them are just going to blow through a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, folks, one of the things Corey just said, which we've heard from other guests in other episodes, is making sure that the demographic match of your product matches the retailers where you're going to be available. The example he gave, some retailers can sell a $40 supplement all day, and others, you better merchandise it with either an armed guard because it'll be stolen or a Dyson vacuum cleaner to vacuum the dust off of it. So Corey, let's dig in there a little bit with a little twist on this. So what would you tell a small emerging challenger brand as they might be trying to grow out from the farmer's market and they're starting to either get that itch to go to retail, or maybe they're getting a couple of inquiries because they meet people at shows, or someone made a recommendation. How do you recommend a brand sort through where to go first? And as you already said, and Tracy reinforced, and where do you say no?
Say no to drug. I'll tell you that. I can talk about drug all day long. But I think that, look, it's always also a combination of opportunity too, right? If you're getting an opportunity, and let's say it's reasonable opportunity, I'm going to just keep using Lassens because I can't think of a better example, and they're my favorite now because of you can get in, you can play, you can afford it, and it's not Erewhon, right? It's just like you can't always get into Erewhon. But let's say it's a Lassens or something, you're not going to make a lot of money, and you're not even really going to necessarily prove your market share, but you can play with them, you can interact with them, you can get a shipper program, maybe you can pop up a table and talk to somebody. You need somewhere where you can play, where you can get your hands dirty. And so to me, that's a really important question about retail. What I said to we turned on Target for 3 years for Wile, by the way. And the reason was because they had tasked, I don't know why my dog is growling. They had tasked their femcare buyer with this whole space, menopause and perimenopause. So there's a supplements VMS buyer, and then there's a femcare buyer. The femcare buyer's primary job is to buy, tampons, UTI support, things like that. And so they were like, well, this makes perfect sense. Let's throw the menopause category in there. And that's not where she's going. She's not going to the tampon aisle. I mean, literally. I mean, yes, there's some period irregular overlap. People are still using tampons, but like literally couldn't be where she's not going. This is the whole point of menopause is you stop having your period. So just absurd kind of, well, we don't know what else to do with it, so let's just shove it into the femcare space. So we're like, well, you don't get it, right? Like, not for better or worse, or you don't get what we're trying to do. So it's like you're not really ready to name it. You're not ready to give a destination for us. So no, we're not going to go into the femcare space. We're going to lose. You're going to be unhappy. We're going to be unhappy. It's going to cost us a bunch of money. Pass. And call me when you have. And then in this case, I'm like, look, we'll fly out to Minneapolis. I'll bring Stacey London. I'll bring Serena Williams. I'll bring all these cool people, all these doctors. Like, let's have a conversation with Target about how to address this category. They're not available for that kind of innovation right now. Okay, you're not ready for that. Whole Foods, on the other hand, had a new buyer. She's like, I absolutely need this customer. We don't have this customer, and we need her. And Whole Foods was in a period where they were doing, they're basically an apothecary, like a little bit of astragalus and a little bit of vitamin C, and you combine it up. Their lawyers don't want to have any claims on their shelves if they could avoid it. They don't want to sell any branded product if they can avoid it. But guess what? They can't, because they're losing to Amazon, they're losing to Target, they're losing to Walmart, and they know it. So they were like, no, we want to bring this in. And we're going to bring in Ray for a younger woman and you for an older woman. And we're going to bring Ritual vitamins in. And we're going to create a women's health space. And we're going to move it because the menopause space used to sit under prostate care. So it'd be like all prenatal vitamins, men's health, a tiny shelf at the bottom, dusty for the old ladies. And then, maternal health or whatever. So they combined all the women's health categories in one and recreated the space. And it's still hard. But at least they had the right idea about how to position it. And so to me, then that's a retail opportunity. We may still fail, but you've created the most fertile ground that I could possibly make for us to succeed. So I'm willing to take that gamble. And it's a certain number of stores and blah, 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 blah. So I think you have to weigh all those things out. Like, how are you going to be merchandised? Is anyone going to see you? What are you going to do about it? Can you train the people in the stores to educate people about your product or not? Like Sprouts is a clean floor. You can't put signage up. You can't put shippers up. You can't put up shelf talkers. Is Sprouts the best place to launch a brand new concept? Maybe. I mean, they do a really great job with their off-shelf display, and I love Sprouts, and we're in Sprouts. But, do you need a whole shelf talker? Like, if is it imperative that you have that information, then that's not your right retailer, right? You got to find somebody who'll play with you. So you got to think about all those pieces. The shelf guarantees nothing. You have to guarantee that you're going to move it off the shelf. And it's a gamble, but you want to make educated gambles.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. What you're saying is you need retailers that will work with you and that will see your vision and also be a strategic partner.
Ideally. But again, I had the luxury of having those conversations, perhaps because of my experience, partially because of the product category. If you don't know anybody and nobody knows you, then you got to make some, you got to take some shots, right? And with repurpose, like I didn't get to define the category. It's a cup. Like they're not gonna
Yeah.
redo their world for me.
Right. No.
So we had to just play. We had to just play where we could play and shoot the shots we could shoot and hope for the best and do it correctly and strategically and all that. But I didn't have the luxury of calling the head of merchandising, and I didn't have the head of Haba was interviewed in Women's Wear Daily saying that Wile was the most exciting launch they were having at Whole Foods in 20. We were in the 24 trends report this year for Whole Foods. They couldn't have leaned in more. And it does well. It didn't blow it off the shelf. We're still trying to educate a woman that perimenopause exists and that there are options. And so that was like a great example of how we used every lever they had. I mean, I had a wing in every store talking about perimenopause when we launched at Whole Foods, like a giant wing about Wild. And it's still, a medium performing brand, right? So um none of that guarantees anything. It's still the work. So who will do anything with you, really? I would play with anyone who will do anything for you with you to start.
And you make another good point, and we talk about this, we've been talking about this a lot lately on our episodes, is it's not about shelf placement, it's not about just getting on the shelf, it's about sell through, not sell in, is one of our bumper stickers. And we talk a lot lately about velocity,
Yeah.
right? So talk to us a little bit about building consumer demand. You've kind of touched on it, but what are some of the best tactics you've seen about driving that velocity and consumer demand for the brand? And maybe talk specifically about Wile, because that sounds interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for every brand.
Yep.
So if it's a food, sampling's so important, right? You either have a good cookie or you don't. I mean, if you have a good cookie and you go out there and start sampling it, people are gonna buy your cookie. Like that's kind of how it works. You can't really sample a supplement in the same way, and you can't sample a cup in the same way. So
Right.
that I've always been in this sort of undemoable product. Although we did a ton of demos with Wile actually, and it was interesting. It was effective in some ways. We could demo the tinctures and some other things, but really in that case, I didn't really need you to love my product because it's a tincture. Like it's bitter, it works, but like it's a tincture. But I needed you to have a conversation with the rep there. And did you even know it exists? Did you even know you're in this state of life? So that it was more like a selling tactic to be able to demo and then to train the retail reps there. Um, the original question was how to move it off the shelf, how to increase velocity. Oh, it's such a complicated question. It depends on the category. I think that working the store is really important. I do think placement does matter. I think that sampling matters. I think most people, if you have the money to spend, and you will have to have the money to spend. I mean, really, price reductions and TPRs and attempts to sample and try are really helpful. They can be a bit difficult in categories like tableware because people buy on deal, right? So just because they bought it on that deal doesn't mean they're coming back, because then Chinette will be on deal next week. But with supplements, with food, I find that if you can give people an entry price point that they can then get used to, that they can get into, then you can get them to sample it. If you believe your product's going to work and it does work, then you'll get them to come back. I was just watching the Fast Pass. Did you watch the Movie Pass documentary? It's called Movie Pass,
No, I
Movie
haven't yet.
Crash. But they figured out a system to get people into movie theaters, and it was 39.99, and you got unlimited movies, and it worked great. And then they brought in all this venture capital, and they lowered the price to 9.99, and they blew up. They had 20 million subscribers. Of course, they crashed the whole company within 12 months because the average user was going 4 times a month. So they were losing $36 per user per month on 2 million people. Guess what? That's not a sustainable business model.
No.
And we're coming out of a period where so many brands have bought market share. I mean, Casper was a huge success. They made $100 million. They spent $100 million to get $100 million, right? So many of the brands that we think of as being super successful bought a lot of that market share. Now you have newer companies like Olipop, et cetera, who really started grassroots at, Erewhon, really built it up from one shelf to two, and so obviously there's something in that product that sticks. It works. People are buying it. The financials work, et cetera. But I think we're seeing the end of this incredible cheap cash, this flooding of the market, this ability to have all these low velocities, non-profitability. That ship has just sailed. And so it's actually going to be really difficult, in my opinion, for emerging brands to gain market share without the capital to lose a little bit of money for a while in order to gain new customers at a reasonable price point, or, spending enough money that they see you on the shelf until you can catch up with yourself. That's why I think you've got to be alternative now. You got to think smaller in the beginning. You got to grow. I mean, to your point, if you're really going to grow a business today, yeah, go to Lassen's and then make sure the velocities work at Lassen's. And then go to Whole Foods SoCal and then make sure the velocities, like, keep making sure everything's working before you expand if you want to build a sustainable business. Because I'm not seeing, you know, I'm not seeing 2 to 3 rounds of investment anymore without that, right? It's not like, oh, we've got market share. We just need to increase velocity by raising another $2 million and, I don't know, buying programmatic podcasting or something. I don't think anyone's investing in that business anymore. So you better make sure that even if you only have 20 customers, they're rabid, and then try to get 40. I mean, I hate to say it. It's real block and tackle. It's like old school CPG now, like how it used to be before all this money flooded in.
So let's talk a little bit more about money, Corey. You've kind of already started to peel it back here for the folks. But what are some of the lessons you've learned in raising money, and what do you look for in an ideal investor? And then there's a couple of other follow-ons, but that's probably enough to kick off this topic with you. So kind of some Corey greatest hits of raising money, what you've learned and where you might have stubbed your toe. And then what do you look for in an ideal investor now that you've, gone through this a couple of times?
An ideal investor, well, there's different kinds of ideal investors. I think an active investor who has active ability to introduce you to things and forward you. If you're small and you don't know people, you need that investor. You need someone who can call up buyers, potentially who can call up debt facilities, who can help you get banking, who can help you do all those things, especially if you don't know what you're doing. I also think there's also another category of ideal investors, and that's the one who give you money and walk away and I mean, for me, I like that investor. I don't need someone actively monitoring my everyday movements, who believes and trusts in us and let us do our job. Sometimes those are really nice because I think an investor who's too involved can also be a little bit distracting sometimes. And I've never really had that problem, but I've heard a lot of people's horror stories. So I've been very lucky to avoid that. The key now is, if you can get $1 million, figure out how to make it last 3 years. I mean, if I was to raise, we raised $3 million in our seed for a while, and I had an 18-month plan to get to, 3 million in revenue and then go from there. And we did, but there was no more money at the end of it, right? It was very hard to raise another round because the whole world sort of collapsed. So had we known where the investment landscape was going to be, where it is now, I don't know, we would have spent 3 years to get to $3 million or 4 years to get $3 million. But there was a disconnect before where you really couldn't sacrifice top line revenue. And now I think investors are a little bit more lenient with the idea that you're going to grow slow and that they're going to be in a sustainable business model. So I would look for people to have a lot of access. If you need a lot of access, if you don't need a lot of access, you want people who are really not going to distract you and take you on wild goose chases and tangents. Most businesses have that opportunity, I think. Oh, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And well, can I implement my plan first and see if it works? So I don't think there is an ideal investor. I think it'd be great if they clicked with you. I think my number one rule now would be, what if there's no more? Like, definitely every money dollar you raises if you may not get any more. You can't really plan for another raise or a third raise. If you're successful, you will. Believe me, companies are still raising money. But if you're in that middle phase, you're like, well, we're kind of successful, but we have a lot more to prove. We need a little bit more money to do it. Those people are getting killed right now. That's the dead space at the moment. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of really interesting innovation is, and why a lot of people do go launch into their coconut water, because it's a safe play. But there are people out there. You just have to sort of relentlessly pound the pavement and find someone who believes in you. But number one, like, be your biggest believer. Like, you better believe more than anybody else. And ideally, you're out. Like, you can't shut up about this shit. Like, you're at cocktail parties talking about it. You're everywhere you go. You can't. All the founders I know who raise money have been those kinds of founders.
Obsessed.
Truly.
So where do you look? For the complete rookies out there, Corey, where do you start to look for money, aside from like friends and family? Do you go back to like your university, some sort of, angel group? Do you call industry contacts? Do you look for people that have invested in similar businesses, or are they no shot because they don't want to compete with something they've already invested in?
I think similar business is great. I have not been successful at tapping previous CPG founders for more investment unless they've already transitioned to like a VC role. Um, with Repurpose, we had to find people who really, really cared about the green movement, right? Because our growth was good, but you're going to make a lot more money investing in Olipop. It's not a unicorn, right? We're going to have to slowly grow the business category up. So you want in that case, and with Wile too, I think with missions, you kind of want patient money. I need patient money. If I'm going to do something radical, I need patient money. If I'm not going to do something radical, if I'm going to launch another ashwagandha and I can show you exactly how I'm going to penetrate the market and it's going to be a gummy and I'm going to do Amazon, but fine. You don't need patient money. You're trying to turn this thing around in 3 to 5 years. How do you go find them? Friends and family is where people are back to, unfortunately, right now for their first rounds. And there's nothing wrong with doing your first proof point on friends and family. It's just the threshold for what now constitutes VC is getting a little bit higher. Um, I hear a lot about the private equity market moving in to fill in the gaps where VC is dropping out. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what it looks like, but sure. A lot of people are crowdfunding again. It's become a big thing again. And if you have a technology or a product or something like that, it's not a bad idea. Like if you built a new headphone case or something and it's really cool, maybe you have a patent, you should go on Kickstarter and do a campaign probably and like see what the buy-in is, because you're de-risking the investment as well for yourself. Like I put it on Kickstarter, I thought it was the coolest thing ever and nobody cared. Well, maybe I don't have a product fit, right? Or I put it on Kickstarter, and 1 million people bought it. Okay. And also that's going to be what you're going to take to an investor. Look at my product market fit. Um, so I think crowdfunding isn't a dumb idea. It's hard. It's hard and it's painful and you got to put rewards to it's a lot of work to run a crowd. I used to represent Indiegogo. It's a lot of work. But still viable. There's a lot of angel groups. They're very convoluted and confusing. So I'm sorry, they're not always easiest to use. You're going to apply, you're going to wait, you're going to fill out these forms, and then you're going to have like 5 minutes to pitch like 40 people that you've never met and hope they all say yes. And so it's sort of complicated like that. So I would try to stay in your local area, and maybe pitch people in that area and really like follow up with them. My number one tip to anyone is just work LinkedIn, like worked it to death. Almost everything, especially during the pandemic, because the last round I raised $4 million. I didn't even see any of these people in person, which I'd never, because it's like nobody will take a meeting anymore.
Right.
So it was all over Zoom, and I worked LinkedIn, and then I would get leads going. You got to get these people on the hook. Maybe they just say like, cool idea, and that's it, right? Okay, that's a lead. Like you need to turn that into a soft lead, and you need to follow up with them. I just put together a newsletter for Dayo. It's got my first interview with Unicorn Finders. It's got my new founders or my new advisors I added. The app is ready to download. I'm putting it in a newsletter. I'm sending it out to people who barely responded to me. Like, sounds cool, but I don't have any time. Like, you're getting an email from me until you tell me to stop emailing you. Because I don't know, maybe one day I'm going to get you. Maybe one day you're going to be like, okay, well, they've got this, or now they brought in, so and so. Like, I get it now. And I think people often think, well, they said no, we're out or whatever. And if they say like not a fit, like we only do SaaS, don't email them. They're going to be pissed off. Or, we only invest in food. Like, I'm not going to email that person again. But casual, whoever you get, you need to keep following up with them. And there's lists of investors online, especially pre-stage and pre-seed investors. There's whole groups I can point to. Maybe we could put it in the chats or something. But that you can go through, and you're cold calling, so you may not get a response. Even I don't get a lot of responses from some of these people. But if you can get somebody and they say, hey, it's not for me, turn around and be like, do you know anybody? Like, don't give up so quickly. Like, try to just mine every single thing. I go through investors' LinkedIn's, and then I look at the comments, and I go and befriend the commenters, and then find out what the hell they're up to, and like work my way. It's just a never-ending game of like lead generation and lead follow-up. So think about it in the same way you're selling Whole Foods. Think about it the same way you're selling each store, each customer. You got to sell these investors, and just because you sent them a deck doesn't mean shit. Like, send them every interview you've ever done. Send them. If I was raising money, I would absolutely send this podcast out. I would certainly be posting on LinkedIn. And I'd say, look at me. I'm on a podcast talking about how smart I am. I know all this cool shit. Invest in me, right? Like, you just have to keep reminding people that you're doing cool shit. Just like you have to remind customers to buy your product off the shelf. You are the product when you're raising money.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Bruce, any comment there? Right up your alley.
No, that was all good stuff. I want to be sensitive to Corey's time here. I guess the only super quick follow-up, we've heard from other entrepreneurs, Corey, that the first meeting with a potential investor, the last thing I'm doing is going through the model or doing a deck. I'm just having a meeting to see if I want to spend a couple of years of my life working with this person. You've had a few rodeos here. Your first meeting, is it let them make the call, and if you want to torture them with the model, you will? Or is it more stylistic for that first 15 minutes? Hey man, I just want to make sure we're not going to kill each other the first time we have a soft quarter.
I think in a perfect world, right, we would have met and then we would have had coffee and we would have gotten to know each other. I find that kind of casualness is harder. I've through the pandemic, for sure, I'm getting right to the point. I'm getting right to the deck a little bit faster. Especially if you're cold pitching someone, they're probably hearing the pitch because it was worth hearing, may not be any interest in investing. Especially with Wile, everybody wanted to kick the tires because everyone wants to know what's going on with this customer and how they make it work too. So they just wanted to, every investor in the world reached out to us to talk to us. It was crazy, but eventually I had to start saying no because they don't really want to invest. They just want to know what we're up to and what our competitors are up to. So I think there's a lot less time and interaction to do that kind of casualness. However, a lot of people will say that right off the bat. And I usually ask them at the beginning, hey, do you want to have a chat or you want to go into a deck? And for certain people's brains on Zoom in particular, to focus yourself, the deck isn't always a terrible idea because I'm just looking at you. I can't even really see your eyes. We're not really connecting. That's why Zoom sucks. But if we were in a room, I'm not going to break this eye contact conversation we're having to pull out that would be weird. But here we're just kind of what do we do? Zoom's on. And so the deck is a little bit easier, but the deck has got to be good. You got to have tight, clean, short, concise decks. I would say that's the key. I hate that that's one of the keys to raising money, but if you're not even starting with the deck, you're in trouble. I just read a deck the other day and was I can't even see for all the words on all these pages. Who are we presenting this to? And so I do think the deck is a little bit more important than it used to be for that reason. And I think at the end of the day, it's still the document. Did they expect that you generated the deck? Did it look good? Do you understand how to tell your story? Do you know how to tell a story of any kind concisely and clearly? It's a narrative. You're telling someone a little short story. And you should think about it with a beginning, a middle, and end. Think about TED Talk. Don't give up on cheesy shit. People here's a quote I'll give you. We at Repurpose, we make compostable cups. Every investor would go into is what about Starbucks? What about Starbucks? What about Starbucks? And in the beginning, we'd sort of say yeah, cool, Starbucks. Now, here's a fact. There isn't enough polylactic acid, which is the material that makes bioplastic, in the world. The supply could not possibly supply just even North American Starbucks. Second, they don't want it. They keep doing these fake competitions so they can pretend they're greening, and they never actually switch. They do all these fake compostable. It's been going on for a decade. Starbucks is never, because it would cost them 1/1,000,000th of a cent more. They're never going to switch. But I would sort of get into it with investors, and then now I'm yes. Now I'm just we're absolutely going to do Starbucks. Just tell them the fucking unicorn. Just tell them the bullshit they want to hear. Sometimes you'll get stuck on being reasonable with them, i.e., there isn't enough polylactic acid in the world to supply Starbucks. That's a lot. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear vision. They want to hear future. They're falling in love with you. They're falling in love with the concept. You have to lure them in. It's a seduction. And so it's a little uncomfortable for me because sometimes I have to play a bigger game than I like to play when I really want to be well, no, we're just focusing on the next 18 months. No, they want to see the vision. I'm here with Dayo. It's I'm here to change the way we relate to social media. I'm here to change our mental health. I want to affect the mental health of 213 actively limiting social media users in the United States. I want to have an effect on their mental health. These are big numbers, big pitches. Don't forget about that stuff. Don't forget about that big journey, but then don't stay in that the whole time.
Right.
I got a big idea and here's how I'm going to do it. Don't forget about the how I'm going to do it part, but don't skip the big idea and get right to the nuts and bolts. And I don't think in the first meeting you're ever walking through a P&L. In fact, I never walk through a P&L with an investor. I just send it to them, and they have some analysts do it, and they come back and say, we don't like your margins, or we love it, or whatever. And that's, I don't think that is really part of the meeting process that much anymore.
Great.
Great insight. So Corey, tell us a little bit about your greatest success in your career. What are you most proud of?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Well, I mean, both of those companies for different reasons. With Repurpose, no one was talking about the anti-plastic movement. And then by the end of it, I was in front of the California State Senate, testifying on behalf of the needs for bioplastics. And we got bills passed to actually change the compostable standards in the state of California. I would say that was something I was really proud of. I think with the menopause movement, we were the first in many ways to get to market and to retail and to really change that narrative conversation. I got my partner Judy Greer to be one of the first actresses to talk about it. Now Naomi Watts is talking about Halle Berry, whatever. So I'm really proud of the movement we got there. I guess those are probably my points. As far as our retail win, I don't know. I've had a lot of wins, I guess. Had a lot of failures as well. I mean, my Whole Foods launch with Wile was pretty much like why you get in the business. It's like everyone's aligned. They want it, just as much support as you could possibly ever get from a retailer. That felt really good. It felt like, I had developed my career to a level where I could have those conversations and people would believe me, and cut through to all of that. And that I think makes me feel like people trust me. And I think that feels really, really good.
So sadly, I drew the black marble to ask the next question. So what's the one thing in your career, Corey, you're like, damn, I'd like a do-over there?
I would have raised a lot less money probably, and certainly at Repurpose. What if I had it to do over? I mean, I had it to do over. I mean, with Repurpose, we went B2B first and it didn't work, and then we went B2C. So we ended up burning through more capital than I would have liked in order to get to the consumer product. So that obviously had an effect on dilution and time and all of those sorts of things. I don't know. That's a really good question. Thing that I really, really did.
Well, it's a good sign that you're struggling with something you'd like to do over. So
I mean, I have a million tiny mistakes. Almost all of my mistakes are things I just didn't know, which is so true of CPG, which is why I like to consult and mentor brands, because, oh, you didn't know that you could be in wellness DCs and save tons of margin as opposed to being in all 14 UNFI. It's just stupid shit. Like, did you know you could negotiate the incoming PO with Fresh Time before you get to KeHE, because KeHE's going to take all that money and they're not going to pay you until Fresh Time pays them. So you're basically on consignment, and now you're kind of I mean, companies go down for shit like that, like tiny little details, because you don't understand the marketplace.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I've made a million of those mistakes.
Yeah, but the good news is what you basically just said is you're always learning.
You're always learning. And that's what I like about this business. And it keeps changing. It's changing again. I mean, maybe not for the better in some ways. But what I like about where we're headed now, which is scary for new companies, it's fundamentals. And it's back to the fundamental. Can you build a sustainable business? It sounds crazy because we've been living in this era of like, everything, everything from Uber to, Airbnb, like spend, get customers, don't worry about profitability. We'll figure out profitability later. We'll figure out how to make the business model work later. And that infected CPG. And then you see companies like, Hello Bello declared bankruptcy, 180 million in sales, and they're out. Like, it'll still get you when the spigot turns off. And so, I work with this company, Kaboo. I've been working consulting for years, and they're a family-owned business. They've only taken one raise, and I'm always like, raise some money and let's grow faster. And he's not. And I think he could have done it differently, but he's got a sustainable business. He's good. He's not in any trouble right now. So he's looking pretty sweet right now. Maybe he's not going to grow as fast as some other companies, but he's got a real business. And I think we're just going to see a lot of the non-real businesses fade away right now.
Right.
So one last question. Who's the greatest influence on your career? What person?
The greatest influence on my career? Well, I'm going to say a couple people. First is my family friend, Mr. Rob Nally, who I called when I didn't know anything at Repurpose. And I said, hey, I'm looking for investors. You're a really famous, you're a really big businessman. Can you advise me on how to even get money? And he's like, I'll just send you some money. Like he just invested a couple $100,000 in us. And I was like, oh, people really believe in me. So that really changed, I would say, my mindset hugely, because I understood that it was hard to accept. I felt like, oh wow, I'm taking money from somebody. These are my family friends. What are the obligations? And it made it hard for me to walk away from the company because I felt leveraged into it. But I also felt like it's okay to ask. These people have money to invest. They believe in you. And his point was, I'll put it out there. Maybe I get it back. Maybe I get a return. Maybe I don't. But like, I trust in you. That was a huge step for me to my confidence and my ability to do this. And I would say right now, my biggest inspiration is Genevieve Gilbreth, who is or Gilbreth. She's the head of the Springdale Ventures Fund, who I believe is who introduced us. And she's someone I was working. She invested in Wile. They invested in Wile, and we were, they're great. They're a great team, but I was in trouble. My business partner had walked away, and I was running out of runway, and I was having trouble raising. And I gave her a call, and I'm like, I need help. And she's like, I can help you, and she did. And we sold the company and everything went well. And so I think that was a huge inspiration in my career, that you could actually get help from people. And I think as entrepreneurs, we have this sense that we should be impenetrable and we should be, we should already know everything. Otherwise, why would you give us the title and the money? And the reality is we're part of a community and we need help. So I'm really a big fan of Genevieve right now. I've never really had that kind of guilt-free and helpful interaction with an investor where you really felt like, no, they have everyone's best interest in heart, including their own. And so she's my inspiration right now.
Awesome.
Well,
we love
that's great. Tracy, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just said we love Genevieve. She has been a guest on our podcast, and she is the one that introduced us. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Genevieve she had a great episode and visit with us, and we were grateful for her time and her intro to you, Corey. So Corey, how do people get in touch with you? We've had a few of our guests do the unthinkable and give out their cell phone numbers. So I'm not sure you're quite that crazy. But if people want to reach out and learn more about you or your current ventures, what's the best way to do it?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, like everybody, as I just said, work LinkedIn. You can email me. It's my name, Corey, at my last name, Scholibo, SCHOLIBO.com. I own Scholibo.com. There's not a lot of competition for it, all 10 of us. So you can email me at Corey@Scholibo.com. You can go to dayo.co, DAYO.co, to see my new project, Dayo, and sign up for being an early user of the app. Those are great ways to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, Corey, thank you so much again for your time. This has been a great visit, and we wish you well in the future. And if Tracy and I can ever help you out, come on back.
Really appreciate it.
Loved it. Thank you so much for joining us. Please follow us on our LinkedIn page, Road to Retail, as well as Spotify and iTunes. We'd appreciate the follow. And thank you again, Corey. It was a great episode, and thanks for spending time with us.
Good luck out there, folks.